Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. This is a meeting of the Planning Board for the Town of South Kingstown. Today is Thursday, November 14th, 2019. And as typical, I'd like to do roll call as we start off. We have Elise Torello. Here. Pam Rubinoff. Here. Joe Murphy. Here. Steve DeMasi. Here. Maria Mack.
Here.
And the chair is here. And we have Peter not here. Okay. Next, the agenda item, and it's a single agenda item, and that's the public hearing on the draft comprehensive community plan. And before we get started, and hopefully people have had the opportunity to go to the website and take a look at the draft document, a pretty powerful tool, and as it's deemed, a vision for South Kingstown. But of interest, there are two new elements or chapters, if you prefer, that were mandated by state law, which is to consider, and they are the natural hazards and climate change in particular. And not surprisingly, if you look at the photo that was on page 129 of the draft report, I think it's a fitting reminder of how climate change is impacting our shores, our environment, and in particular, you just look at the coastal erosion. And Matunic Town Beach is a very good example of that, where since 1939 to 2006, we've lost anywhere from 145 feet to 200 feet of oceanfront beach, basically. The other element was the energy plan, and in particular here again on page 255, there are three goals outlined in that, and one of them is renewable energy production facilities, and I think the town has jumped to that one already, and all you have to do is look at the solar farm or solar field that were installed at the URI landfill and also the landfill on Broad Rock Road. The second goal, reduce energy consumption of town buildings, vehicles, and equipment. Again, something that is important and something that we wanted to add, and we have added to the plan. And then finally is understanding energy efficiency practices, so that staff understand it, and more importantly, residents in the town understand the importance of energy efficiency. I was struck by a statement that in that chapter in particular, where Rhode Island spends $3.5 billion annually on fuel and electricity. That was absolutely a fascinating stat. It just struck me. And in the Rhode Island Energy 2035 plan, it identified energy efficiency as the best tool to reduce energy consumption. And I think, again, if you look at what the Office of Energy Resources has been doing over the last 10 years, they have created some serious incentives for alternative energy to take place. Some might look at that in a negative way, but again, that's something that we wanted to talk about. Finally, I do want to share a statement I found in the draft plan that I thought it was worthy of sharing. And it reads, robust public participation is the cornerstone of effective community planning. And I thought that was very germane and very appropriate for our situation. So with that, I want to thank everybody who's come out tonight, and hopefully we'll have some good discussion, input, comment. And before we do that, I do want to turn it over to Kayla Gray, who will lead the effort. Thank you.
So I'm coming over here mostly because it felt a little funny to sit down and talk about all of this to you all. But I have a short presentation. It just goes over sort of the highlights of the plan, how we got where we are today, and what are some of the big changes we see in it, just to sort of set the stage on where we are before we get comment from everyone who's joined us tonight. So bear with me for a second while I get this going. I also used a new platform for the presentation, so might take me an extra second. Okay, so I use this tool called Prezi because it gives, instead of like a flat PowerPoint, it gives us a little bit more dimension. It gives us a little bit more movement. It just gives us a little more creativity when I was thinking about how to go through this tonight. So with that, this is sort of, you see the outline of South Kingstown. Each one of these bubbles is a topic point where I'm going to go through here pretty quickly. And bear with me on it. It shouldn't take very long, but it just gives us a little bit of framing for where we are tonight. So the purpose of our meeting tonight is sort of twofold. One, to give a little bit of an update to you all on sort of where we sit now and where we've been tonight. So that is a little difficult to read, but so the presentation I'm going to give you is just a quick piece on what comprehensive planning is in Rhode Island, why we do it, what the 2019 update process has been, and what are sort of the meaningful changes in the plan, and then where does it go from here. For participation side of things, so we had a 30-day public comment period. We opened for written comment, and tonight we're here to hear oral comments from people who are joining us. Our intention is to prepare like a formal response to the comments we hear so that people's comments get the thought and consideration they deserve. So we're going to make a report from what we hear tonight and what we heard in the written comment, and then make some recommendations about what should or shouldn't change, or respond to and answer questions as they come in a little bit more of a formal format, so people have something they can look back at instead of batting back and forth ideas tonight, giving some thought to things where they're due, and then giving people something to look back on sort of what we did with what we heard. So with that being said, why do we plan? So the role of a comprehensive plan, there's sort of two pieces to it, right? There's where the state frames comprehensive planning in Rhode Island and what that means for us as a community. And then there's likely what means more to the people in the room. What does the plan do for you as a community, and what is the local role of it? So in the context of planning in Rhode Island, the state asks us to look at a 20-year planning horizon and to update the plan at a minimum once every 10 years. The state asks us to think about the following topics. You'll see them written up here: natural hazards, recreation, historic and cultural resources, housing, economic development. Really, it's everything we hope the land within a town can do for the people who make up its community, right? We have a finite amount of land, and we have a hope that in comprehensive land use planning, we can see the role for all of these topics and the importance of all of them, and how we kind of balance them within finite land and defined boundaries. So for us locally, the plan sets our community goals, and it articulates the vision for what we see for ourselves in the future. It establishes new directions where they're needed, so when we see new data that points us in a different direction for things we need to think about in the future, then we try and do that here in this plan. It creates a guiding document for our regulations and policies to follow it, and it charts a course for how we think we get to that vision, what steps put us closer to it. Our plan has all of those topic areas the state asked for on that first list, but it has a few others that are specific to it, right? The University of Rhode Island is something that's unique to South Kingstown. There's some other things that we give a little bit more thought to and break out on their own topics, but so that list on the right side there is all of the elements of our plan that we're putting together now. So, the 2019 update. It's funny to call it a 2019 update because it's been going on for several years, right? We're just in 2019 now and we're getting to this point on it, but it actually started in 2017. And the idea behind this update was not to revamp the entire plan and reconsider everything within it, but to, as John Rando pointed out, hit on those two elements where we hadn't met what the state set for new standards for addressing, and then to just reassess what was in there for the progress we've already made, or the things in the plan that just seemed a little unclear to us how to get there, right? We tried to take some time and think about, if it was unclear what we were trying to say we were going to do, let's sort of flush out what it is we're doing here. So the planning board led this effort with staff support and consultants from the Horsley Witten Group. We used the state's guide books for planning to help us get there, and we figured out a few key goals for this project. One is to include those two new elements we talked about. Two is to refine those goals and policies, right? Look at them and see if they make sense and they really are going to get us where we want to go in the future. And to reorganize the plan a little bit so that each element had the same set of information within it. The plan in 2014 had some data pulled out in different sections that you would sort of be looking to in the introduction that might inform natural resources. We tried to pull those out and put them with the topic that they related to and get a little bit more predictability for someone who reads that plan. And then we look to modernize the document a little bit aesthetically, get some infographics in there, some of the ways that we now in 2019 process the world and the information we go forward. An interesting piece that came out of this is themes throughout the plan, right? The plan itself is broken into elements by topic, but we realize there are these themes that also come up throughout it in the way our populations are changing and the way we approach the world that were worth calling out. So the board put a lot of time into figuring out how those themes cut across those different elements, because we don't live in topics. We live in a place that touches on all of them. So what did we do? We reviewed all of the goals, policies, and actions. We had 2 public workshops, one at the start, one about a year ago when we were finishing content development before we jumped into a deep pile of formatting work. And then we worked with some of the advisory committees in the town and town departments to broaden our scope of input for what we were hearing and what we were thinking about. So what's new? So we actually have 3 new elements. 2 of them are energy and natural hazards and climate change. The third one is one about citizens. So that's not sort of a standard element in a comprehensive plan, but there's a lot just about the demographics of what makes up the community of South Kingstown that we thought was worth pulling out into its own chapter to talk about what the citizenry is and what about that population leads us to different needs. So I'm not going to spend a lot of time on these because John talked a bit about what those goals are, but so these are the goals that we saw for the energy element. Our purpose with the energy element was to evaluate our municipal energy use, what we use in town facilities, where we can improve what we're using in town facilities, and how we can better encourage and support residents to pursue their own energy efficiency and renewable resource opportunities, be that on their homes or in property they own they're looking to develop for renewable energy, a little bit of it all. For natural hazards and climate change, our purpose here was to assess the vulnerabilities we have and to get a sort of zoomed out understanding of what climate change means to us and what we need to be thinking about in the future to help us improve our resiliency and to reduce the impacts that storm events are going to have on our community. And the citizens piece, as I said, is really sort of a statistics section. It's a lot of data in there. So there's information about our population and race and ethnicity, our education and jobs, and our income. So some interesting points. I just pulled out some ones that were sort of particularly interesting to me. The state's 20-year population projections for South Kingstown show us with an increase of 25% from 2017 going forward to about 2040. So that shows us the idea is that speculating us at 2040 at a population of about 38,500 people. So that's a big increase from where we sit today, actually. Looking back on the growth we've had, between 2000 and 2010, we saw an increase of 2,700 people in population. That actually is not the thing I thought was particularly interesting. What I thought was interesting here is that half of that, more or less, was actually on-campus URI student population. So it's an important factor to think about, I think, in South Kingstown is where URI impacts the way our demographics tend to look and what it means when we pull that out, right? So in reality, we actually saw a residential non-student growth of half of that rate in that period of time. Another interesting piece is that our largest age cohort right now is between the ages of 55 and 64. So that points us to our aging population, right? We see that a vast majority of the residents of the town are getting in advanced years, and that gives us some really, really unique challenges for the future and things to think about doing differently. We also see a decrease in the number of families with children in town. So on ethnicity and diversity, South Kingstown is a predominantly white community. We have a relatively little racial diversity. 9.6% of people, according to the U.S. Census, basically don't identify as white alone, so as some other race. An interesting piece, though, is 5.4% of our population identifies as Hispanic, and that is up from 1.8% 20 years ago, so that's an increasing trend for us. Education levels, I'm going to sum this up to say we are a well-educated community, more so than the majority of the state. We have about 15,000 people who are classified within our workforce population. We have an unemployment rate of 2.4, which has been trending downward. That's 2018 and 2017, I believe it was 3.9, so it trended down pretty solid dip in that year. And then about 70% of the workforce here is private wage salary workers. 20% works for government, which, if you think about it, the municipal government is a pretty robust system here. URI also likely falls into government. And then 6% is self-employed. And finally, we see that the median income in South Kingstown is right around $80,000 a year. Over about 30, let's call it 38, I guess, percent of households earn over $100,000 annually, but there's another side to that story too, which is that we have seen increasing rates of poverty in the town. So we used to have 3.9% of families in 2010 who were living at or below the poverty line, and in 2017 we've seen that rise to 5.2%. So while we are a community of means, we are also a community of need. So those themes I talked about that we identified throughout the plan, I wanted to just put a screenshot actually from the plan of those and just touch quickly on what they are. One is social resilience, sustainability, village-centered development, healthy communities, and then our changing populations. Those seem to be the things over and over again when we discussed each element. We saw these trends coming up of things that had everyone scratching their head and thinking, how does this relate to this, right? What were those topics that seemed to matter most to us? And so when you look through the plan, you can read it element by element. You could read it start to finish. You could also follow a theme through there if you were interested in a particular theme. Format. A lot of what is different about that plan is a format plan. So as I mentioned in the beginning, the breakdown of what is in each element was changed a bit so that they're a little bit clearer. We also did this thing where there's a new idea in there. There are two new sort of groups of topics, guiding principles and current practices. This is a screenshot out of the plan as well, but this talks about sort of what all of these things are. They're normal words, they have technical meanings, how are we using them all, what does it mean, right? Part of any good plan is making sure you understand what we're talking about when we say something. So the two new things in here, goals, right? Goals are where we want to be, what we think is going to get us to a vision. Policies are the things of how we approach things when we don't know, when it isn't a known answer, but there's a way we need to approach a problem that comes our way. The actions are those known steps. These two new ones, the guiding principles. Guiding principles are those things that, in working on the plan, the planning board identified as values that we really hold true as a community. They're things that are espoused in all of the policies and actions and goals we set, right? Those are those things that kind of guide the way we approach these issues on a more global scale. Our current practices are the things we do now, right? So a lot of what also happened in the plan was there are a lot of things that were listed as implementation actions, right? Steps we were going to take to get somewhere. And when we thought about them, not all of them really were steps. Some of them were really just things we continue to do, have done, and will do in the future to keep doing things well. And so we wanted to call those out too, but make sure they were called out as something a little different, right? Those are our current practices. So in each element, you'll also see what are our current capacities and what we do now. A little bit of the other formatting thing that you'll see changing is we did some grouping to the topics. So in the 2014 plan, we used to have natural and cultural resources and then open space and recreation. We adjusted those a little bit in this new plan, and we said natural resources and open space should be its own piece. Cultural and historic resources should be its own piece, so separating out natural and cultural resources to stand a little bit separate from each other, because when we started discussing them, they felt separate. And then recreation, again, standing separate from open space with the idea that not all open space is recreation, not all recreation is open space, right? Sometimes those two things are separate, so we called them out a little differently to give them all their own proper considerations. All right, so when we reviewed the existing language that was in the plan, I'm going to go through and give sort of the high-level changes to what we see in policy in each one of these 5 elements. I'm going to start with land use, which is the most wordy, so bear with me. So for land use, I want to focus on what are our changes in our future land use map. So the future land use map of the comprehensive plan basically takes your zoning map and looks at your zoning map to say, how do we intend to change that in the future to reach our vision? So I wanted to run through really quickly some of the interesting things that are proposed for change in that future land use map, because those are meaningful differences to this community and specifically to the business owners and residents in those areas, but really all of us globally. Our Industrial 1 zoning districts, we actually start calling them industrial mixed-use districts because they tend to be the mill buildings that are being used for a variety of things, not just industrial use, right? There are a variety of different businesses that get supported in there. And we wanted to make sure that we're keeping an eye on the fact that mixed use is a growing trend, the idea that a space can be used a little differently and it might be okay. So that's something that the plan calls out for us to do a little differently in the future, is consider what those are as sort of mixed use areas. We also look at the neighborhood south of the commercial highway strip on Old Tower Hill Road. There's a number of professional offices that have started to transition in some of the homes there. Actually a meeting with some of the residents out in that neighborhood before the comp plan update started, talking a little bit about changing that residential 20,000 square foot lot district into more of a transitional commercial area, a space where we could have some more commercial expansion, assuming it was in the right scale. So we talk about that as coming potentially into a commercial neighborhood district in the future. We also see a similar change out in West Kingston. People who are familiar with West Kingston will know there are a lot of businesses out there now, and they're all in a residential zoning district. And they've been there for a long time. When we look at the West Kingston Village Plan, they're pretty essential to the identity of West Kingston. And so we want to look a little bit about how we can affirm them in their place and give them some reasonable opportunities to continue to thrive out there. Another piece is looking at the tower at the crossing, which is zoned commercial neighborhood now, sort of a low-scale commercial, but to think about it as a gateway to the community. We recently designated Route 1 as a scenic highway. That is sort of the first real place you get to when you cross the border, and so we call that out as a gateway special management district, as something we want to develop some standards for how those businesses can expand and how we can make that into more of a welcome to South Kingstown place. And then finally, another piece that comes out of this is how we reuse town-owned properties in the future. So be them small properties, large properties. As we start thinking about reusing those properties, we tried to build some things in here about how to assess those government and institutionally zoned properties and what they should best be used for when they're no longer government institutional use. So our housing trends. If people are engaged in town, and I see a lot of engaged faces in the audience, housing is a big topic for us. Our data within the housing element suggests that a growing number of households in the community are cost burdened for their living expenses. I think that seems to resonate with people anecdotally too, that while we're making progress towards getting to the state set goal of 10% deed-restricted affordable housing, we have some affordability issues going on here. And so the plan directs us to study that and look at a framework for how we approach affordability of housing in general with some new tools, because we understand the tools we have today have been making incremental progress for us, but we need to do something a little better than incremental. Economic development trends. So a lot of this actually we talked about in land use when I was thinking about putting these slides together earlier. So we look for modest opportunities for the expansion of business activities in town. We talk a little bit more about mixed use development and what that can mean for places to create vibrant economic spaces where people can live and work in close proximity to each other. And then we talk a little bit about new types of industries and modern workforce trends like co-working spaces. For open space and natural resources, this section really points us towards an idea of figuring out how we, one, get great access to the open space that is around us and conserved. Two, how we become really good stewards of that land, how we manage our forests, how we manage our open spaces. And three, how our open spaces can be designed to protect ecological functions that exist in the land that are unique and special and serve us all in a very, very, very wide amount of ways. Circulation. So in circulation, there's more information than there used to be in here about non-motorized transportation. One particularly interesting piece is we have a map that depicts sort of known unsafe walking and biking spaces to get a little bit of, put us in a motion where we're starting to make progress about prioritizing those spaces where people who are moving around not in a car can feel safer moving around not in a car, because we'd like to encourage more of the non-motorized transportation in town. So that is sort of the overview of what's changed in the plan, what we've seen in there. You see it look a lot different, have a couple of new elements, and then honestly have some little course corrects to the policies that there were in there previously. So at the point where I'm going to stop speaking at you all for a moment, I wanted to just talk about where we go from here. So we're here tonight to hear from you all. We're going to put together this public comment summary document to give some consideration to the things we hear tonight, the things we've heard in writing, and so that we have a document that other people can look at too, right? We can look at it with the planning board, you all can look at it, and we can all sort of have an understanding of what we heard and how we're going to take that feedback. From there, the planning board will make some recommendations to changes likely to the plan, things that we missed that other people caught that should be in there, things that maybe shouldn't be in there at all, right? Either way, however it goes. The planning board then makes a recommendation for the comprehensive plan to be adopted by the town council. When the town council reviews the plan, they adopt it actually as an ordinance. So once the planning board makes its recommendation, we'll have another set of hearings with the town council when they consider this to be adopted as an ordinance. And once that's through, we also need the state to be approved by the Division of Planning, because Rhode Island has a back and forth reciprocal planning process. So that is a little bit about the plan and where we are tonight. So thank you all for joining us. And with that, I'll hand it back to John.
Thank you, David. So if anybody has comments, please come up to the podium, state your name, and provide your address.
Hi, David Flanders from the historic village of Curtis Corner and Conservation Commission. The vision that we see throughout the comp plan has always been a good one. It's always been optimistic to promote orderly growth patterns based on the aspirations of its citizens, will preserve and enhance the unique quality of life. And South Kingstown is indeed unique, and when I talk to other people from out of state about it, what struck me, and still does, is that we are a town of extremely different villages. I mean, every one is just so different from each other, and I think that is one of the highlights of what we have here. So in land use goals, number 4, the integrity of the town's villages will be intact. I second that. I think that's a really, really high priority. But when we get down to the guiding principles and zoning and such, i.e. the nuts and the bolts of the thing, I see that that's actually at odds with preserving the integrity of the town's villages. For instance, guiding principles, additional density in the villages will support the town's long-term economic sustainability. That's really not true, because houses will spend between 1.15 and 1.25% more of town services than they will pay in property taxes. It's not a sustainable method or way to go forward. So I see that as a problem, and an underlining thing that we really need to question the density of our villages. It was mentioned in the plan that the idea of keeping the density to the urban core or cores goes back to 1986, and I think that was very forward-thinking planning. But there has to be a point at which those particular cores have been built out. And how can we possibly make them even more dense? I think mixed use of existing buildings is definitely the way to go, where we can have residences above businesses, certainly on Main Street. We can certainly play around a lot with our mill properties. I think that that's a good thing. But as far as going for smaller lots, say aiming for 5 houses an acre instead of 4, I think that, and it's certainly not visible here with the attendance we have here this evening, but a lot of people are going to be not very keen on seeing increased density in their zoning. I think we need to keep that in our sight. Those, we're here. We can do something about it. I did have one question on the baseline information, talking about a future sewer service area. Is that an increased service area from what exists now, or is that? Do you know? Because
I can answer that for you, David. I think it may be marginally increased, but it also may be marginally decreased. The bigger change you see in the future sewer service area map is that it aligns with property boundaries now instead of being a buffer. It used to be the future sewer service area map was where we had our existing utilities plus a distance buffer that just made a soft blob, for lack of a better word, around it. And we actually took time going through it with the Director of Public Services and Town Engineer to make that line up with properties, leave out properties that didn't seem to make sense that we caught the corner of, and catch some of the larger ones that seemed to be appropriate. So it's functionally just about the same. It might be a little bigger, it might be a little less, but it was not a large-scale change to it. It was just to align it with our property lines.
Because the only reason it caught my eye, and I mentioned that, it's because it's for decades been one of our town's growth management tools, and I would really like to not see that, get jeopardized. The town's vision for supporting village-scaled growth, I just question, what kind of growth would that be? Because adding further density to the villages runs contrary to the land use goal number 4, the integrity of the town's villages. I don't see how we can make them dense and still retain the existing character. It's an oxymoron. Akin to that, talking about changing zoning from R20 to commercial neighborhood and R10 to commercial downtown, I would really question the impact to those residents who are living in these R zones. Certainly wondering how it's going to affect their property value. That property value could conceivably even change with a keystroke to a keyboard, just by having that title and having a realtor say, well, I'd like to show you this house. It's in a commercial downtown area. Oh, you mean it's not in a residential area? And I question those kinds of changes. I do appreciate what we're talking about when we talk about that area south of what I jokingly call Hell Corners, the main intersection in town, because, those are originally, just to look at them, they're originally residences, and now there's printing shop, a cafe, and all those things. But I don't know, and you can let me know about this, but I see those as maybe non-conforming uses if they are in an R10 or R20 zoned area. They could be conceivably, to my brain, non-conforming uses, but to actually call them now residential commercial, I think we're going to facilitate more commercial buildup in what was originally, or maybe even predominantly, a residential area, and I worry about that. For instance, if it does affect property values, doesn't that affect property taxes? When I was doing my neighborhood tree planting program, I was on Orchard Ave, and this woman who bought one of my trees came out, didn't buy it, it was given away, said, you know, this street used to be entirely tree-lined. I said, really? It was before my time. And they must have been elms. And she said, so it would really behoove the town to make it tree-lined again, because it will increase everybody's property values, and it would increase the property taxes. So I'm suggesting that the opposite could also be true. If we zone something now as a hyphen commercial area, that we could be lowering price values. Talking about the land use goals, and this is my last point, 4-1, 3, 5, and 6 stuck out to me as changes that I think, of course, will alter the character of the affected villages. 4-1, concentrating population density and infill development within the villages. Quote, this may include allowing for an appropriate mix of uses, revising standards controlling the size, shape, massing, scale, and location of buildings and lots. That's huge. 4-3, review and revise regulations to locate a range of housing types and sizes within the villages. 5, rezone residentially zoned parcels south of Kersey Road and Peacedale to commercial downtown, what I talked about before, and those areas of Old Tower Hill Road to commercial neighborhood. I don't see how they cannot alter the character of these villages. And the nuts and bolts of this plan just don't seem to line up with the vision that was promoted in the beginning of the document. So I think there were problems here, and I just see that the existing plan can give license to more of a spread, more of a density I'm actually more worried about, than we're going to be happy with once it's actualized and once we actually see those brick and mortar places on our streets. I think there's a problem here. I think it needs to be looked at more. Thanks.
Thank you.
Hello, my name is Richard Youngkin, and I live in historic Peacedale. And I'm also on the Historic District Commission, for that clarity. I just have a few comments. I think that the plan is nicely written, frankly, and very readable. However, I think it needs some tweaks. And two questions having to do with this is the period for written comment, is that extinguished? Is that gone by now?
I think the only reason we put a timeline to it, honestly, was to make sure that we could get the writing to the planning board ahead of the meeting. And so I would tell you, at the close of the hearing tonight will be sort of the end of our taking of comments, is the plan right now.
All right.
So if you had something now, we would accept it. If it comes in after tonight, we're at a spot where we've got to start moving on making recommendations. So if you have them verbally and give us, that'd be wonderful.
Well, I know that there'll be future moments, particularly with the town council. I would urge you to actually extend a written comment further, that period. I don't know how many comments you've actually received. Can you tell me that?
Yes, 2 that were not page numbering or like Scrivener's errors.
2. This plan is a very complicated plan. It's very long. It takes a long time to digest. So for your own sake, I would hope that you would listen to more written comments and more verbal comments. There are these little glitches in it which we can enumerate. For instance, on the land use plan map, the current existing land use plan map, the South County sand and gravel operation is not shown as industrial. It's shown as residential or open space. There are things like that I'm sure will pop up, and they need no other eyes than your eyes and staff eyes. It's like any written document that goes through an editorial process. If you've ever written a book, you don't do your own editing of a book. You hire an editor to do it. So that's probably would be meaningful for people to look at it carefully for you and to pick out these glitches before it gets on up the ladder. I'd like to second everything that David Flanders said about the density question. And I realize that there are goals for affordable housing, and I realize that there are some goals to locate future development within our core areas. Those are laudable goals. But I think you just don't simply rezone property to do that. I think you have to have very much more sophisticated, maybe code-based kind of approach, and also to have these design standards in place. This planning board and past planning boards, town councils, and planning staff have not been rigorous on establishing design guidelines in the past, and we have suffered for that. So I think if you're going to talk about these very sort of strategic, and I know you've been thinking a lot about that design, I mean the density increases, they have to be married up with how you do it from a design point of view. I don't think it's a good idea to just proceed without that in place and having practiced it a little bit in different areas. I know you have development plan review. You are doing forms of design review, but I'm talking about architectural design review and context-sensitive design review with existing building fabric, whether it's just old houses or they're historic and listed or what they are. It just does really mean a lot to, it would mean a lot to me if my property was in those zones, that I knew that you knew how to actually control the design of a transformation of a neighboring property to commercial or mixed use, and that you could do it right and it would come out right. I think David has pointed out that you're creating in any kind of zone change, future zone change like that, this anxiety that will build up in the residential population. So I think it's a dangerous place to go without that stuff in place and having a good track record on implementing it. One of my key areas of concern, of course, is historic districts, and that relates to design review as well. And I think the plan has gone a long way in the historic resources section to address concerns about that. And so I'm very happy about that. That's good stuff. The connection with economic development is also fascinating. And I think it's a very good connection, particularly for our core commercial areas like Main Street. And also for them, for the Economic Development Commission, if they can really get going on design criteria for Old Tower Hill Road, for Dale Carlia, all these things that we've talked about for 20, even 30 years. They've been on the discussion mode, and some of you have been on this board almost that long, some of you haven't, but generally, we talk about it, but nothing really gets done. Wouldn't it be fabulous to have in place those design controls and have an Economic Development Commission that's really behind it? So I see in Action 5.1, you have the formation, you're talking about these commercial development design controls, a manual to do it. Bravo. But it says explore. Why not say do it? All the other action items are complete, revise, assign, review, develop. Why not have this one say write, develop, implement, rather than just explore? We've had, I think, a lot of exploration. We need to do it. And that, I think, would be very meaningful. Do you need the page number? Oh, it's in Goal 5 of it's the Economic Development section. It's the brown section. And then what I also found fascinating, because I'm a real believer in the Saugatucket River and how it benefits the town enormously. And, the Economic Development Commission was sort of held back, I think, for some reason, of going whole hog on their revitalization efforts for the Saugatucket. So I did see that mentioned in the plan, but I thought maybe it just needs another oomph to get them going and to give them the support they need to do that. It was, formulated by the students at URI. They got behind it. It had a lot of interesting stuff in it, and they were very enthusiastic about implementation. And when I go down there on Main Street and I look at the sad state of the walkway that we struggled so hard to get done, and now the paint's peeling off of it, it looks kind of sad, I'm thinking, boy, if they could just get moving on the park system that they were talking about, which is in the plan, and other aspects of it. But one of the things that's missing, which they pointed out, and I wonder if it's going to come up in the plan, is the water quality of the Saugatucket. The whole basic notion of what it is as a natural resource and how we can appreciate it. And they got stuck on water quality. They really wanted to have a good analysis of water quality. So I wanted to ask this question. In the plan, as I read it, we have these natural systems, like the Saugatucket. Probably the Chappaquiddick is another one, and Smelt Brook. I don't know. There are probably a lot of these small streams. The plan seems to talk about developing mini plans or special plans for each of the streams in the watershed, or at least doing analysis of what's going on with them. Have I got that straight? Is this ringing a bell with you guys?
I'll tell you, it's ringing just enough of a bell for me to say this is one of those reasons I'm going to want to take that, think about it, go through it with that lens. Because I do recall some conversation on that, but I can't remember if that is an old policy or a new one in the plan and where it sits. So let us look into that a little more.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure I read it, that you were thinking about doing this for each of the important water systems, watershed, water, wetland-based systems.
I think you're right. I just don't want to say you absolutely are until I get...
Which I'm very much in support of. I'm so glad that's there because there's so much information we need on the Saugatucket, what's happening to it. I think the Economic Development Commission in that report just sort of touched on the tip of the iceberg. Now, this river system, as you know, if you eat Perry Rassos oysters, you got to know about this river system because they affect the oysters. They're affected, the oysters are, in Point Judith Pond by this system. And we have all this stuff happening in it. It flows down through the center of Peacedale and Wakefield. It goes by South County gravel and the asphalt, Lynch asphalt. I mean, there's a lot going on in this watershed. It's an urbanized watershed. The headwaters of it in North Kingstown are pristine. Indian Lake is rather pristine. So it comes down through the heart of the core and changes its values. There are many stories about it turning color in Wakefield, which I've heard for years. Well, it doesn't do that any longer, thank God. But here we have probably one of the most important environmental systems in our town that affects more people probably than any other system does when you think about it, other than the aquifers. And yet it's mentioned maybe 2 or 3 times. There are a couple pictures of it, which is fabulous, but I think it really needs to be looked at, and hopefully this part in the plan that talks about looking at the river systems comes out as an important, I'd recommend it be emphasized a little bit more, because it will help with one other thing I wanted to bring up, and that is, this is the last thing, I'm sorry I'm so long-winded, but the whole nature of intensifying the core area and the density of it relies upon us preserving the quality of life, quote unquote. Now, that is really the environmental quality, the aesthetic quality, the cultural quality of life in the core. So when you have a major environmental feature that goes right down the middle of the core, obviously you have to think about that as a feature that you want to preserve and enhance and get right at all cost. The same thing goes with our park system in the core. The same thing goes with the circulation system in the core. So all of this idea, the parking, all of the intensification ideas have to be balanced against the quality of what we have today. You don't want to make it any worse than it is. You want to make it better. So how do you make it better and still intensify it? It's a huge challenge. It requires great sensitivity, and I think it's a wonderful challenge as a planner to have, but it has to be done very, very carefully. So just think about that in the plan itself, how that is expressed, how you give comfort to the people who live in the core so they don't panic and get totally out of control thinking about density increases. I like the accessory housing stuff, the granny flats, that experimentation. It's a very soft, and the conversion of mixed use to mixed use of second stories in our main street. And, maybe some of the big houses, as they have done in Newport, can get subdivided into condos. These are very small sort of spot intensifications that seem to work. But wholesale rezoning, that can be dangerous. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I have one answer to one of your questions. When you asked about previous efforts relative to watershed, our last comp plan update, which was also done in conjunction with Horsley Witten, they recommended a watershed-based approach, and they actually had an animated map that was shown that delineated the water flow throughout the town.
Yeah.
So
maybe you can get
not
back
a
to
big
that. So much of what happens, for instance, on Tower Hill Road with the parking lots directly affects the quality of the river, the water quality in Saugatucket. That may be one of the primary problems that we've got. We've got stormwater runoff that's not treated properly, and I guess the DEM has already told the town that's a problem. It needs to be, dealt with. Thanks.
Hi. I'm Hope Leeson. I live in Perryville, and I represent in your chart of what people identify themselves professionally as the 6.2% of natural resource professionals in the town. But I was really struck by some of the other statistics in terms of the education levels and the professions in education that we have present in the town. And I sort of thought of that as something that really speaks to what we could be as a town. When this process began, there wasn't a lot of, there was thought, particularly in the scientific community, about the value of forest habitat, natural plant communities that were present in terms of their abilities to absorb carbon and to store it in multiple layers, not just trees, but in the shrubs that are under them, in the soil, in the root systems, in the decomposing leaves, as a really important tool that needs to be incorporated into climate change policy. And everyone talks about carbon emissions, and that gets a lot of focus, and methane emissions. But incorporating the natural systems in the world from a biological perspective, that is a very logical approach. And South Kingstown is really blessed with a lot of natural resources and forested habitat that we could really be an example for the state, just given the level of education of the people in town, the resources that the town has in the educational community at URI, to just really change the way we're thinking about the town. Instead of looking at build-out potential, looking at opportunities for conserving and promoting conservation or promoting enrollment in the Farm, Forest, and Open Space Act, that should be something that is mentioned in there. That doesn't come into the guideline and guiding principles as a recommendation. But also in terms of what Rich Youngkin was talking about in the core of Wakefield and Peacedale, I mean, the focusing on natural resources in terms of wetlands and agricultural land and coastal resources is just one part of what we've got. We've got upland forests, which are, again, huge carbon sinks, particularly the older oak forests that haven't been cut for, since agricultural practices left those areas. But within the town of Wakefield, the trees that do exist could be expanded on. There are tools for measuring the carbon that's being sequestered by individual trees that could be applied to just show what they are doing and what they are doing for cooling. The heat sink or not heat sink, but heat island effect that is in Wakefield is significant, and you really notice it on a hot summer day when it's near 100 degrees in downtown Wakefield, and it's 91 as soon as you get outside of town, and that's all because of the trees. And there is the ocean cooling, but the ocean modifies Wakefield all winter long. It's warmer here than it is because of the ocean coming up through Salt Pond and the ocean. The winds coming up through Salt Pond. So there's a lot that could be done, and in terms of that corridor of the Saugatucket River, that could be a really change the whole focus or the whole appearance of the poorer neighborhoods of the town as well, and add to the quality of life in those parts of town. There was one other. So I would really like, as Rich was saying, he was encouraging you to extend the period of time for written comments, and I would really like to be able to be part of that. I was able to read through it this evening after I left work and came up with these sort of scattered notes, but I really would like to be able to write them down and submit them in a written, cohesive form. And it's disturbing to me that only 2 people have commented in written capacity and there aren't that many of us here. I don't know how well the other meetings have been attended. I know I've been to a few in the past, but is there another way to reach out to people in the community to make them aware that this is going on? I think one of the problems that I think about in terms of my own awareness of what's going on is I no longer subscribe to the South County Independent because it was becoming all about North Kingstown, and I wasn't that interested in hearing about that. And so I think I have lost a connection to the town and what's going on by not subscribing to it. But I think that's probably the case with a lot of people in town, that their news is not coming through, a local source, and so we're not as engaged as we have been in the past, and should be. So I don't know if there's another way that the town can reach out to residents and make them aware that this is an important process and that you're looking for their input, because we're all better for all of our input. And let's see. So the other thought I had was about this gateway on Route at the intersection of Route 1 and Route 138. And in the plan, it talks about it as a commercial gateway. And that seems at odds with what we're talking about for the scenic road designation. The existing enterprises that are there are not doing well. They're really just sort of there on the side of the road, and it's actually adds to the traffic problem when people are trying to access them. And so I don't think it's a good idea to have more commercial activity there. For one thing, it's adding to urban sprawl. It's not reusing and using more efficiently what we've got. And it's just adding a second urban or commercial location on Route 1. As a gateway into South Kingstown, there's enormous scenic value in that location. There's also historic value in that location, and it's gotten lost by, towers and, commercial building. But is there a way to somehow focus it in a different direction and really have that be a focal point rather than a commercial setup, which is no different than Route 2 in Warwick? It's really opening up the door for Route 1 becoming like Route 2. And so I would encourage you to really think about not making that more commercial in that area, and to really focus any commercial efforts on using things more efficiently so that we're not continually expanding our footprint on the landscape and cutting down more trees and more carbon absorbing landscapes. So that's my comments. Thank you very much for listening.
Sorry, if I could just comment one thing that Hope Leeson said.
Just restate your name, please.
Sure, David Flanders. Regarding when she was talking about all the various forests in town, in urban forestry we refer to the whole as, if you were looking at it from aerial photos, the community forest. And approximately 4 years ago, the then state urban forester through DEM, Division of Forestry, studied all of the 39 cities and towns and was able to quantify how much carbon, nitrogen, phosphorus, and particulates each community forest absorbed. And then he modified it. And in South Kingstown, it's tens of millions of dollars. So if you want to put a dollar tag on how valuable, I don't know how we could monetize the value of the Saugatucket River, but it just so happens that our community forest has been monetized. And it's a staggering amount. And it's, I just, wanted to point out, if anyone would like to see that, just let me know. I've got it on my computer. I'll send it over.
Yeah. Mr. Flanders, if you could forward that to Kayla and Jay, that'd be helpful. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Kate Massananti. I'm a community member in Kingston over near URI. And the part of the plan that kind of caught my attention and has been a focus of mine with mainly around the school department, but all through town. Anybody who drives through Wakefield, really any time of the day now, you're sitting in 20, 30 minutes of traffic no matter where you try to go. So the action plan summary, as I read through it, I think it's phenomenal that we are looking to partner more heavily with RIPTA, but I would love to see a deep partnership with RIPTA and URI. As you pointed out, 50% of our growth comes from URI students, and they're certainly not all living on campus because we're in traffic with them all day long. The other 50% is probably more our 60 and over population. As you stated, our families and younger folks, they're declining, which we watch in the schools year after year. But our transportation costs continue to climb. And so with the school district right now, over $4 million of our budget has to do with our transportation because of the size of the community. And I think it's great that we have some of the flex services and the RIPTA buses. I was behind 66 here on High Street, and they're wonderful, but they only run on main roads. So if my family wanted to come into town, I live out in Kingston, I want to get into town, I have to walk 1.5 miles, 2 miles to get to a RIPTA bus stop. Or I can walk on the bike path, which is awesome, but I can only do that half of the year pretty much. If I wanted my 15-year-old to walk into town on the bike path, not from where I am, not too comfortable with that, him coming and going. And also, I think the bicycle pedestrian master plan, incredible, getting people moving, but as our population is increasing in age and the younger families are decreasing, there's not as many people who are going to use that as a mode of transportation. Yep, it would be great to exercise, get out there and get a nice brisk walk, but if I'm having to go into town 3-4 times a week, moving in at the age of 70, I'm not going to be walking the bike path in the middle of December to get into Wakefield and try to buy groceries. So to me, it screams, and I love this concept, policy 1.3, your action 1-3, partnering with trolley program providers. There would be nothing that I think would revitalize the whole town better than some sort of trolley service, be it an old-fashioned trolley or doing what URI has done. They have the shuttle buses, the Roadie mountain climbers that shuttle those kids all around campus all day long between 7 a.m. and I think it's 9 p.m. And there should be some sort of shuttle bus service that is cruising around South Kingstown, Uskapog, East Matunic, Green Hill, because there are people there who can't get to a bike path. I just jotted some notes as the presentation was going on. The increasing percentage of poverty, that means you're going to see less families living out of town where the prices are a little bit more reasonable, maybe have less access to dual cars. So having extra transportation for them would be lovely. Also, as we talk about our declining student population at the schools, our transportation dollars are not going to go down because even if there's only one kid living out in Uskapog, we need to send a bus out there to bring them into Wakefield, regardless of what school they're going to. So the bus still needs to go out there. If we had some sort of partnership with RIPTA, similar to, and I'm not comparing us to Providence, but they have partnerships with public transportation. If you have shuttle buses going around your town and your community, you can partner with them so it's kind of takes a little bit of burden maybe off of the school district if you are able to give vouchers to students to ride public transportation versus sending out a big huge school bus for a handful of kids, because a bus costs $120,000 whether there's one student riding on it or 75 students riding on it. I have all sorts of little notes here. It also, I notice in a lot of your plan is the focus to support the villages, but a lot of the focus is on downtown revitalization. Downtown Wakefield is booming. It's revitalized. We want to keep it revitalized. Kingston, we might want to focus on it. Green Hill, might want to focus on it. We have a lot of villages in South Kingstown, and they all need some attention so that they can get the same kind of, especially with URI, where it is the economy that we could boom over towards URI in Kingston with a little bit better way of transporting people around would be lovely. The last kind of point that I'll make is it would behoove people, if you've never done it. I travel 108 to Curtis Corner to South Road every day, multiple times a day. Have little kids, we're always driving around. Winter, spring, summer, fall, rain, sleet, snow, doesn't matter. There are folks who don't have cars, and they take the bus. And they go and they get on the bus down by the police station. And they will take that bus to Shaw's, and they'll go grocery shopping. And I think the plastic bag ban, lovely idea, but has absolutely impacted the community members that take that bus and go grocery shopping. And they take the bus with themselves and their toddlers and their baby strollers, and they don't have babysitters, and they go to Shaw's and they have to go grocery shopping. And now how do they take their groceries home now in those paper bags? If it's raining, the paper bags fall apart. If there is a bus or a shuttle or something that could come up Curtis Corner Road so that these people aren't hauling basically their livelihood from 108 up Curtis Corner or from 108 into Rolling Acres or wherever it is they happen to live, they need to be able to transport their goods if they don't have a car and they're relying on our bus. It's heartbreaking to see kids, families walk up Curtis Corner Road, pitch black, 9 o'clock at night. Well, some sidewalks, not really, very good sidewalks. I would love to pick them up and put them in my car and give them rides wherever they're going, but it's not really appropriate. But just kind of keep that image in your head. People they don't need door-to-door transportation, but they shouldn't have to walk 1.5 miles with their families to get on a bus in order to go grocery shopping. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello, Kathleen Fogarty, 50 Woodmark Way. I came tonight only because I've had a lot of people comment to me. They don't get to these meetings. Unfortunately, people just don't get up and participate. They get home from work and they're tired. I understand that. But I came because there was a lot of people with the development coming down on Tower Hill Road, Old Tower Hill Road, that are saying, what's going on with the town? What's happening here? What's happening there? So I'm kind of filling them in. Maybe they're not buying the paper either. So they don't know. And then they're kind of, really, that's the best that we could do for the town. And so I feel, I say to them, well, the comprehensive plan is coming up, and, you can go and testify or write. And a lot of people, I don't think, realize that. So I try to get it out there. So I'm going to ask that maybe you extend it more, because I'm trying to educate a few more people about getting involved instead of just picking up the phone or calling me or seeing me at the grocery store and then complaining about it. And I had to tell them, oh, I'm kind of up at the state level right now, but, you can call your town council people too and let them know. So people don't really know this stuff is going on, and then changes occur. And we have, these zoning changes that come, and I just want to say, be careful, because I was a chairwoman of municipal government up at the State House, and a lot of developers would like to get down here to South Kingstown and develop as much as they possibly can. So even talking about the 138 Route 1, opening that up, I could see that trickling down. And then it's the next thing in the domino, and we are a Route 2. And I always fight up there with some of the other people from the urban areas who don't understand my philosophy and how I kind of stood my ground on a lot of different things, because I came from here, and I came from a great town, and was a great town manager that I was a town council person under, and not any offense to the new one, I never worked with him. But don't rush these things. Be very, very careful, or we're not going to look like South Kingstown. There's a reason we fought for LED lights not to be in this town, because I didn't want to be like every other town. I wish we had nice carved signs like they have in Portsmouth, in Middletown, because people come in the summertime and come down here and spend the money, and that really, let's face it, that is the bulk of our economy, is our summer residents. In the summer rentals, and the people who come down here and keep this town as beautiful as it is. So my guidance is to everybody on the planning board and to our people in the planning department who I never worked with either. Look back at what we planned. It might not have been the fastest paced thing that you ever seen, but there was a reason for that. And you want to keep South Kingstown looking like South Kingstown. And going along with what was brought up with the watershed in Saugatucket River, and I tip my hat to you for bringing that up, Richard, because it's a very important. Without water, what are we? I mean, we saw what happened when we had some bacterial issues on some of the water districts last year and testing everything. It didn't affect my water. I'm on the Kingston water, the best water, I think, in the state. But without it, where are we? And again, it's part of our livelihood and what we make our money on, and we get a lot of tax money off of Matunic Oyster Bar and Perry's oysters. So again, be very, very careful about your plans, where you put things in the runoff, because we don't want to mess up that. So again, take your time, be very, very cautious with your rezoning and your development. It's not a rush to make money. You want to keep South Kingstown and what we have here as stellar as it is. So a couple other things is just even the infill development in going back to Old Tower Hill Road. We talked about this when I was on the council about kind of developing it and making it look like you put the parking lots in the back, you move the buildings forwards, we put residential and housing up there. It could even be some type of affordable housing. If that concept could still be looked at, it's just more appealing. It's not Route 2 looking, even what we have. That's what we were trying to change when we were on the council. And then as far as affordable housing, I know that we had the granny apartments, which were a nice add-on to for having some of our seniors stay in the village and live with their families. But also we had the density changing for affordable housing. I think it was, and Colleen, I don't want to put you on the spot, was it like every 3 houses that we had the affordable, we let an affordable housing go in, and then we hit that bust of, the 2008 time period where things got to really, nothing was really being developed. But now if we do have development, I'd still like to make sure that continues. And I do try to stay very friendly with the people who ripped her up at the State House. I try to support a lot of their bills. And I know, and I work with Teresa Tanzi, Representative Tanzi, about busing with URI, and it's something that I think we can still build on. So I'm just kind of adding on a couple of different points. But my main point in being here is that people don't realize what's going on. And even when I direct them to come to this meeting, I get it. They're tired. So I'm here representing for all those people who keep picking up the phone and saying to me, Kathy, why? That's it? That's the best that you could do? Just wait. Some more people have comments on it after they've seen things are going. So don't rush. Take your time. Listen to the people. And that's all I can say. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening. John Reiner, Patty Hill Road in Peacedale. I want to thank you and commend the board for the work that you and the staff have done on this comprehensive plan. I think you've done a great job. I love the focus you've put on the villages. Unfortunately, I don't agree with what some of the prior speakers said. I think we need to bring more density to our villages. We need density in this town. We're seeing our student populations constantly declining. Housing prices, real estate values are going up. There are good ways of doing density. This comprehensive plan just sets the vision. The zoning is the hard part. That's really the implementation tool, as you know, and that's where you get into the nuts and bolts, and I agree very much with what Rich Youngkin said about the design standards. There's great ways of having design standards for your mixed-use districts, as well as even some of your residential zones, and upzoning those properties, allowing duplexes by right if they're designed a certain way, not the garages with the attached houses that we keep seeing, I think, in a lot of our newer subdivisions. I also strongly recommend that you focus on that transportation planning, looking at the bike paths, the sidewalks. Both of my kids utilize the bike paths in town, whether it's to get to school, to get to work. I know a lot of the children are still using that, as well as us adults. I think it's a great form of transportation around. Also, within the villages, we need to look at the diversity of the housing types that we're creating. It's not just 3 and 4 bedroom homes. It's 2-bedroom units. It's 1-bedroom units. It's more multi-family housing in and around our commercial areas, so that having that density, if people want to see Dale Carlia Corner improve, when you start talking about aspiring to top-of-the-shop apartments, the economics of that stuff doesn't work so well unless you have more people there to help boost and drive some of those businesses. So I think you did a great job on the plan, focusing on the villages, future density there. And I live in one of those villages, and I'm not freaking out about proposed density increases. And I know that talking about it in the comprehensive plan is one thing, implementing it through the zoning, that's the hard part. That takes time. That's a lot more meetings like this, and that's where things can get contentious, but that's where the details are really ironed out. So thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, James Murdoch, Greenwood Drive in Peacedale. Recently, I came and addressed a potential expansion of the Kingstown Road Special Management District with the Dollar General project. And what was really clear is that the management of that district that was described in the original comprehensive plan and in the update and is actually weakened in this comprehensive plan is really not taken place. This proposal came and it was just looked at technically. In the current comprehensive plan, the Kingstown Road Special Management District has 3 times the descriptive language as this rewrite. And what I'm seeing is Kingstown Road is a principal arterial highway of the state. That was deleted. Also deleted, due to its strategic location in the town, there is a need for specialized land use planning efforts. Roads like Kingstown Road quite often develop into commercial strips, which exacerbate traffic problems and create visual clutter. To prevent this, the purpose of the Special Management District is threefold: to establish land use development policies for the district, to provide basis for regulations which will implement these policies, and to guide private land use decisions affecting future development of private property within the district. Well, that's been deleted from this plan, and I don't think you should delete it. This particular parcel required a special use permit, and given that it required a special use permit, the zoning ordinance states the granting of special use permit will not alter the general character of the surrounding area or impair the intent or purpose of this ordinance or the comprehensive plan of the town. Good language needs to be in the comprehensive plan. It's true that we have not expanded on what really needs to happen in this district, but pulling even that language out on what we hope will happen in this district further erodes the ability to judge a special use permit to the needs of this particular district. Now, what's in there right now is a retirement home with foot traffic, a group home with foot traffic, an office building with foot traffic, and a Dunkin' Donuts and a gas station and a pizza place. There's a lot of people on the ground, and it's a highway with cars whizzing by and no sidewalks. My daughter was rear-ended. My son totaled a car outside the gas station. Both of those were at the gas station. And several years ago, I stopped for a pedestrian who was struck and killed by a car, and that was up by Holland Electric. It's an area in trouble, and there's more people on feet there, and allowing the next project to come in and say, just look at this on technical grounds, can we wedge it in there, is uncoordinated with the real needs of the area. And I think that we need to make movement in this area, but also really describe and keep in the plan a good description of the intent for this difficult area, and how it should expand in the future that does not, for example, increase vehicular traffic, but instead supports foot traffic in a safe manner, even better than we have today. Some of the Holland Electric's building, that building is one of the more recent buildings, and it looks like it could be in the country. It looks rural. That was nice. The retirement home is set back, so you just see a landscaped entrance. The new office building is set back. All of that development, I think, were upgrades to the area. The Dollar General store was urban and would have become the new eyesore of the area. So that's an example of, what's the aesthetic goal and the pedestrian goal and the traffic goals of that area. Let's define that really well so that the right proposals come there and are and you're able to really have guidance, and the developers are to really have guidance when considering whether a lot is suitable or not. I also want to expand on Catherine Fogarty's point of tourism is huge for South Kingstown, and everything we do should have a sense of place, should be coordinated, should be an upgrade in some way. And you only get that with design standards that steer new designs. Doing something in a beautiful way and doing something in an ugly way often can cost the same. But if an ugly plan comes before you and you're just nitpicking, it's a different kind of battle than if you say, "Hey, look, don't even come unless you're looking like this." It's not fair to developers to work with the town and for a year and check off all the things that have been a problem, and then at the end, we don't like it, kick it out. It's not right. That's not fair to developers either. I think the Kingstown Road Special Management District, all of them are there because they were difficult areas. We need to really do something more than we have, and the current plan actually rips out more than half the language of that. So that's my comment. I wish we had more time for written comments. There's been a scramble just to, I'm like getting emails in the past day or two. I think that there's a members-only Facebook group where it's discussed. I mean, that's how the town is pulling people in. That doesn't make sense. We get robocalls when there's a water restriction, but There's not even, email lists that go out to all the town residents that tell them what's going on. You have to kind of hunt for it. And I'd like to really advocate for a better connection to the public, so that and it's only fair for developers to have better guidance as to what's going to ultimately be successful. Thank you.
Thank you very much. This is a public hearing, public meeting, so anybody else who would like to comment, please do. Okay. Kayla, any thoughts? Or actually, before I go back to Kayla, let me look to the board. Any thoughts, comments relative to some of the comments made by the public at this point?
Really appreciate the public coming out, even though it's small in number. All of your comments were very good. I think we should definitely extend the time period for comments and continue to find ways to reach out to the public. We do have a member of the press here, and I have asked her to push her editor a little bit to allow her to write multiple articles. But again, I think we need to continue to get the word out and give folks more time and more knowledge about the plan.
Anybody else? Kayla, that was the comment about more written time. I've heard 3 speakers mention that. And so some members of the audience came in, prior to, because that was very early on. Can you reiterate your statement made on that issue about written comment that you made earlier?
Yes, we'll see if I remember it exactly. And I'm going to tell you right now, I don't remember exactly, so I'm going to just give a new sort of thought on written comment. So we ran a written comment period from September 25th until October 25th. I hear the comments people are making about how to reach people. That is a real struggle that town hall and municipal governments have right now, as the way we all communicate with each other is changing very rapidly. Government is inevitably on the slower side of that than we all are as humans individually. For this one, we did push it out through Facebook because we understand that to be part of how people get information. There is actually a way to sign up for notification off of the website, and we did push things out to those people who were notified through our news flashes. There's no reason why we can't allow more public comment. At the end of the day, it's been a balance between making sure there's time for public comment and balancing the other side of the coin, which are the opinions that we've been taking a little too long to get this comp plan adopted. So hearing the comments about additional public comment, really at the end of the day, we want as much comment as we can possibly get from people. We had a specific piece to the public comment period ending on October 25th, mostly for logistical reasons, so that we could get those written comments to the board ahead of the meeting. We will certainly discuss, I'm sure, after the feedback we've heard tonight about what is a new window for that. With that in mind, I tell you all to sign up for the town, it's like homepage newsflash, the planning department newsflash, because if we do extend the comment period, you'll certainly hear about it there, as well as the newspaper for those of us who still read it, and through Facebook, because we're trying to round out how we get out to people.
Kayla, if when the town council gets our recommendation at whenever it gets there, do you know if they'll have a public comment period or whether they'll just have a public hearing, maybe make some tweets and then, vote on it?
Yeah, I don't know that that's been exactly decided yet. So they will inevitably at least have a public hearing because it's adopted as a new ordinance and we'll need to go through that process. But I think inevitably we'll look a little bit right now about how to make sure we're getting as much comment as we can from everybody in a way that we can incorporate it.
I think it's unfortunate that you have to establish deadlines at some point because you need a cutoff period to move forward. And that's the only issue I see. the plan has been out there, and it's, we try to get public input. We've had public forums, we've had a couple of public meetings, and I hear what you're saying, but we're waiting for comments, and now people are saying, well, we haven't had a chance to comment, and we want to move forward. Like we said, we've had issues with people say, why is it taking us so long?
To your question about whether or not the council will accept written comments prior to the public hearing, the answer is yes. The town council always accepts written comments from the public on any subject. Whether it's described as a formal public comment period, we can certainly do that. We can make notification available to the public that their comments will be accepted prior to that public hearing. This was a unique new process here in South Kingstown. The innovation of a public comment period is one that the planning department initiated this year. So just that piece in itself was an attempt to get as many comments as possible. This isn't the last time the public will have a chance to comment. I certainly would support the idea that if the planning board thinks it's appropriate, extending the comment period and accepting more written comments is appropriate. It's a good idea.
Thank you, Rob.
I think the comment about how do we get out the information is a real good one. And I would encourage us, because the plan itself is really the blueprint, and then there's so many things, as we've heard tonight, about what needs to be implemented, all of those actions, that we might want to be thinking about what is the ongoing public outreach on this kind of, on the plan and its implementation and its actions. So we could give some thought to that of, I know that on one of our other topics we were talking about who might be able to, go out into the community. Do you have a group of people that you want to go talk to? And might there be a presentation that, Peter, who's in the chamber, can give to the chamber? Or, when I go to, a different meeting, how might we be able to continually outreach this kind of information? Because, over the past year, we have gotten a lot more people coming on a regular basis to the planning board meetings, and that's an option. But I think that we should just think about our overarching outreach on the plan, its implementation, and getting people engaged.
Thank you, Pam. Next steps.
Yes, so next steps from here. One, we're going to figure out what we're doing with additional public comment and what a window of time is that gives us some opportunity to spin around that public comment summary, get recommendations on changes through and discuss with the planning board, and get us to a place where we don't have a comprehensive plan that's new with 2017 data in 2021. So we're going to sort of work on that. But the next steps, generally speaking, that caveat and adjustment aside, will be to have this written summary of the public comments we've heard, what the recommendations or sort of the analysis on the comments are. Some of them are sort of digging through to see where we can see if it's been answered already, looking at where we change things. And then from there, the planning board will likely work that through at like a work session to figure out what to do with them, and then have a regular meeting where we recommend the comp plan be adopted as the ordinance for the council, and then the council will run their notices and move that process forward. Likely we'll sort of watch this all happen over the winter. I would ask you all to I suppose at the end of the day I'll say, we're always downstairs. We always answer the phone. And if you have any questions about where we're at, find a copy of that public comment summary when we're putting it together so that you can look at it at home and see what's going on. Reach out to us. We'll push it out through the news flash. We have a website for the comp plan. We try and keep up to date with what we're doing on that. And so we'll sort of work to try and get things to you, but don't be afraid to have a two-way street with us when there's something you feel like you want to hear and are wondering where we're at with.
Also, I'd like to add, work sessions are public meetings. Everyone is welcome. We've had small amounts of, handfuls of people come to our work sessions, and a lot can happen in work sessions. It's a good opportunity to hear the thought process and the way in which the planning board digests material and public input. So please don't hesitate to come to work sessions as well. It doesn't have to be a public hearing in order for the public to attend.
Okay. I guess with that said, if there's any further comment, I'm going to put that request out there now. And if not, I think we have next steps as articulated by Kayla. With that said, would anybody like to make a motion to close the meeting? We have a motion from Steve. Do we have a second? Second from Pam. All in favor?
Wait, question. If this
Go ahead.
public hearing is closed, does that mean that comment will not be accepted, which sort of is contrary to what we've just been talking about?
No, the motion is to close the meeting, not
No,
the public.
he said public hearing.
Then, Steve, do you want to take that back? Yes. Okay. No, close the meeting. Okay. So we have a,
Here's a thought for you guys. So potentially we could close the public hearing in an oral sense and continue to accept written comments for a period of time to be integrated into the recommended changes. I think the idea of continuing the public hearing, if we're going to continue the public hearing, we'll need to continue it to date specific and be prepared to commit another meeting to a public hearing. And I sort of feel like the tenor of what I'm hearing in the room is we've heard the oral comments. We'll have the opportunities in front of the town council for more oral comment, but we wanted a better window for people to give some thoughts in writing who might not be able to attend. So that's another alternative to think about doing here.
So I'll make a motion to close the public hearing with keeping a comment period open to our future work session.
and other meetings. Okay.
So does that mean that if someone comes to a work session and has a comment relative to the comprehensive plan draft, they will not be able to speak because this has been closed? Or can they submit written comments and speak if they so desire at a work session?
Yeah, I think what I would say is a little bit in between the two of those. I think if someone attends the work session when we have that public comment summary and we're talking through what to do with it, I imagine that to be a bit of a dialogue, just knowing this board and this community on sort of how those things are being pieced. I would say it likely means that we wouldn't open a new round of additional comments to be heard at that meeting to need to be addressed again and with another rounds of revisions and a second work session to follow, just because that can lead us down sort of a very long road. And so I think functionally, if we did it this way, we would accept the oral comments heard tonight. We would give a window to get some more written comments. We would have certainly a dialogue just based on practice and how we tend to do things on the recommendations for changes. But that likely if one of the recommendations for changes at that work session, if someone came and proposed a whole new idea, that might not necessarily be something this board considers. It might be something we direct them to bring to the council.
So we have a motion from Steve, a second from Pam, further direction from and suggestion from Kayla. Any further discussion on the motion?
Yes.
Pam?
I see in the staff notes that there was a draft motion about directing the staff to develop a public comment summary. So I'm just wondering if that's a separate motion, if we still need to do that.
We can't do it yet because we haven't got all the, to a certain extent, we can't do it.
Okay.
Any further discussion on the original motion by Steve, seconded by Pam? All in favor?
Aye.
Nays? Okay, the ayes have it. Thank you.
So we're talking about a work session in January, correct?
Yep, based on the calendar, yeah, I think we're looking at a work session in January. It gives Jay and I some time to digest these comments, get them typed up in a meaningful way, give you guys some proposals and thoughts on what's in there, and also sort of lets us get through the holiday season and all the oddness that comes with scheduling then.
So I'm just wondering, do you want to set a date to close written comments, anticipating that our work session is on a particular date in January, and you're going to need a certain amount of time ahead of that to summarize those additional written comments?
Yeah, I think that's a very good idea.
January 1st.
Yeah, so if we backed it out, Jay's pulled up a calendar because he's savvy like that. Your work session in January would be on the second Tuesday, which is the 7th. Oh, yep, nope, I'm counting the 31st. Sorry, the calendar's throwing me off. The 14th of January on Tuesday, which is your work session date. Going backwards from there, the agenda needs to be posted and moved out through our office by Tuesday the 7th. Going backward from there with the holidays, I'd say we're likely looking at like a mid-December, right? So that we have at least a week to catch those additional public comments. In truth, they come in one by one as opposed to in a litany, so we'll try and be incorporating them along the way. But I would say, oh, Jay, if we could, would you switch that calendar back to the December page? I'd say we will likely push out saying the public comment period will get extended to, let's keep with our Tuesdays, Tuesday the 17th of December. And that gives us a week of time, more or less, pre-holiday season to get those sort of synthesized and considered to get things out to you all for the 14th. Yeah, which is, functionally, it's a doubling of the public comment period. So I hope anyone who's looking to give written comment feels like that's a good time, and definitely let your friends and neighbors know who are looking to do it. You know, this is an additional comment period, and we would be happy to have it. All right.
Okay. Thank you, everybody. Appreciate it.
Motion to adjourn? Yeah. Motion to adjourn.
We have a motion by Maria, second by Joe. All in favor? Motion to adjourn.
Aye.
We are adjourned. I'm so excited to get out of here. I was running with that.